Hello and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today it is my special honor to host Mike Goldman, leadership coach, author, and speaker. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. My name is Kale Houser. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have an amazing guest that I want to bring to your attention. His name is Mike Goldman. He is a leadership coach, author, and speaker. He is doing some amazing things in the leadership space as far as coaching and consulting, and he has some pretty incredible books out right now. Mr. Goldman, thank you so much for joining me today. It has been my absolute kind of excitement as I've been reading through all your material and seeing what you've got going on to get to talk to you today. So thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So this is pretty exciting. So I was looking at your books, and as far as I'm aware, you've got 2 books published. Is that correct?
That's true.
All right, sweet. So you've got your first was Performance Breakthrough, which was in 2015, and then your most recent is Breakthrough Leadership Team. And I love your subtitle to this, Strengthening the Heart and Soul of Your Company, because that's really what leadership, at least in my opinion, is about. Is about being that business leader that strengthens your company. Can you tell us a little bit about that book? Why write these 2 books? And then just give us a little synopsis, if you don't mind.
Yeah, it's funny. So as a leadership team coach, I, for many years, looked at the whole purpose of my business was about helping companies grow, helping companies scale. And I woke up in the middle of the night, couldn't fall back to sleep. And, you get these wacky thoughts that come through your head in the middle of the night. Most of them are not really productive. But one productive one was somehow it came into my head that what I really do is I help build great leadership teams. Right. And I said, well, that's interesting. And I read a lot of books. I'm reading, I read about a book a week or so. And I said, if that's what I do, I probably ought to read a book or 2 or 5 totally focused on that, because that's kind of interesting. And I went and looked. And I went on Amazon and I searched and I found, of course, thousands of leadership books. I found a bunch of team building books, but I said, I can't find one book that is totally focused on how you structure, attract the right people to build culture, build accountability, continue to develop and improve, execute with discipline for a leadership team, which is a very specific animal. And I said, well, if that book doesn't exist, maybe that's one I need to write. So I went and wrote the book, and it didn't change my coaching practice all that much because it was what I was already doing, but it changed a lot about how I think of my brand and my book and some of the speaking that I do.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting, because really the books that most authors write, especially if you're in the consulting coaching space, they just become the manuscripts for what you are pretty much already offering, and that kind of refines that a little bit and I guess formalizes it, if you want to use it as that term, being that author. That's really cool. Now, you used leadership team quite a bit in that scenario or that description, because most people that listen to my podcast, I've got a range of audience, so you may have, somebody that owns a plumbing shop or an HVAC, business, all the way to maybe financial advisors. Like, how do you define or differentiate between different types of leadership teams? And do you focus as part of your business on a certain kind, or do you kind of help all?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in my business, my focus is on basically it's CEOs and their direct reports, and I work with them as a group. And it's funny, I get some CEOs calling me and saying, well, I don't want you to work with my team as a group. I just want you to work with me one-on-one. And frankly, I don't care how big a check they're willing to write me. I won't do that. And I tell them the reason I won't do that is because I say, I know if I'm not working with your team, half of what you tell me is bullshit, and I have no way of checking that out if I'm not working with your team. And it's not that they're lying. It's that they don't know half of what's really going on. So in my leadership team coaching practice, it really is that executive team that I work with. But for my book, for my speaking, and we'll talk later, maybe, I've got a podcast that I'm going to start coming up about building great leadership teams that I'm starting. That's my project for 2023. The way I define a leadership team, it doesn't have to be that executive team, but it's a team of folks that lead other people. So if you are an early stage entrepreneur and it's you and three helpers, what I talk about is ways to actually scale your business and grow that leadership team around you. Frankly, if you're a solo entrepreneur and you're not looking to grow a team, a lot of what I talk about may not be as relevant. But when I say leadership team, it's that executive team, but it could also be any team of folks that lead other people.
Okay. Yeah, that's really fascinating. And I know I wanted to interject the half of the things that he's telling you is probably not true or accurate, and then the other half of what you're telling him doesn't make it to his teams or his or her
Great point.
teams. Because it's just that filter where we all, whether it's on purpose or not, we all have our own little bit of egos and pride points that we don't want to be told when we're wrong or if we're doing something wrong or even if we can improve something. And oftentimes we found too that filter kicks into place of usually out of a little bit of self-protection and pride, but outside of that, that's really interesting. And I like that concept. You talk about waking up at night and your mind just starts running. My mind is running right now as you've made that comment about working with teams solely, which is I think that's kind of the right way to do it to get the actual results and change that they're looking for to serve your clients. Cool. You talked also a little bit about team development and culture. Now, switching gears a little bit off of defining teams. Well, actually, I want to go back. Is there, because you talked about solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, do you work with a certain sect of teams? Are you more focused on like corporations that are well established, or do you handle the startups that maybe are looking to grow their teams? They've got their one or two, and they're looking to expand.
Yeah, I do. I'm working with a startup right now, but it's a startup that's got about 150 people,
Okay,
and that's
right.
pretty well funded. So
That's a good start.
what I typically work with from a size of company, type of company, it's cross industry. It is typically small to mid market companies, and from there it's typically revenues of 4 or 5 million at the low end, up to a couple of 100 million plus at the high end. I hate working with Fortune 500s. I spent half my life working with billion-dollar companies. Life is too short. I like working with the small and mid-market guys. But what more than anything attracts me to work with a client, because the good news is that, good and bad news, I don't have time to work with everybody, so I've got to pick my clients, is it's got to be a CEO that is coachable, a CEO that's a lifelong learner, a CEO that really cares about their people. It starts there. Without the right CEO, I'm not going to work with the team. That's typically a non-starter. So it is about type of company, size of company, but just as important or more important is the CEO and where their head's at.
And do you find that is that shift you talked about, not working with Fortune 500 companies, well-established companies? Do you find that's oftentimes the differentiator is the mindset of that CEO that is the big contributing factor?
No, for me, and this is kind of, selfishly, it's just the folks I like to work with. When, in half my life working with Fortune 500s, I worked for big management consulting firms before I had my own business, which I've had over the last 15 plus years. You can, it's just, it takes too long to turn that ship in a big company. You've got a great idea, or someone on the team has a great idea, and 5 board meetings later and 10 PowerPoint presentations, and
Right.
and the time passed. Now you can finally move. What I also found is when I work for the small and mid-market companies, I feel like I'm impacting people. I feel like, I get CEOs that say, man, I haven't been able to take a vacation in 5 years. And now I went to Europe for 2 weeks and the company's better than before I left. And with a Fortune 500, I never felt like I'd have that impact on people. Yeah, some investors were making a few more pennies because the companies are more valuable, but I never felt like I was having that kind of impact on people.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty neat. And because as coaches, as consultants, that's what drives us, is seeing those types of results and seeing that impact. And to see that firsthand is absolutely phenomenal. So that's pretty cool. Is there something that comes to your mind that you want to share, like of an instance maybe that you can talk about where that has been one of those moments, like, man, this is why I'm doing this, because you saw this change or this result?
Yeah, there's a great one, and it's a client I've been working with for about 7 years now. Where when I started working with her, smallish company, and I started working with a woman who was a brand new CEO. She had been promoted from COO to CEO, and there were two owners of the company that, frankly, were not necessarily helping very much. They were throwing rocks in and doing certain things, and it was very frustrating to this new green CEO. So I was working with her and her small leadership team, and we built a wonderful foundation that frankly took some time. And 2 years after we started working together, from her being a green CEO, trying to figure out how to deal with these two owners that were not easy to deal with, she had gotten, with my help, she and her leadership team got the company to a point that she bought the company. The company had grown to a point that it had great value to her. She had grown to a point, her leadership team had grown to a point that they knew they could take it and run it. Without those two owners, they could do much more with the company. So she went from being a green CEO with a company that was flat top line for about 4 years straight. They were making about 3%, 3% to the bottom line, to they were growing 25%. Bottom line was 20%, not 3%. And she went and bought the company from the two owners, and it changed her life. It changed the life of a lot of folks within the business. And we've been growing it together ever since.
Yeah. That is cool, man. 3% to 2025. Yeah. Oh, who won't sign up for that? Like, that is legit. That's awesome, man. Congratulations. And another point you bring up, because most people on average think of CEO and they're like, yep, top of the pyramid, reports to no one. But a lot of CEOs have, like this scenario, have business owners. They are an employee of somebody else that owns the business, and you still have to deal with that. You're not only leading people, but you still are reporting to other people, and that, whether it be shareholders or actual owners of the company. That's a
Yeah,
fascinating dynamic.
that's not always the case, but it was the case there. It's the case where you've got a board. I've got one company I'm working with that's a public company, and trust me, they've got folks to answer to.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just getting to that level of CEO doesn't mean that you make all the decisions and everything is just your idea or the highway kind of thing. So that's a good point. So as we transition a little bit, I want to talk about, because you talked about culture and you talked about attracting people. Right now our economy is up in the air. Who knows which direction it's going to go? And we're certainly seeing the impact on the employee level in hiring. What are some things that if a team comes in and talks to you and they're like, man, we cannot get people to apply to our jobs, we cannot get people to come on board and stay past our onboarding process. What are things that companies today, 2022, or coming into the holiday season of the end of 2022, to help attract the right people for their business? Is there some practical tips that you might have?
Yeah, I'll tell you what it's not about. It's not about putting a great job posting out there.
Right.
That's not going to do it. Now, don't have a crappy job posting, but
Yeah,
it's not about having great job posting. It's a few things I tell them. Number one, the best way for you to attract great people is to have a great culture, to have a great company. Now, if you don't have that, you're not going to push a button and get there overnight. But you've got to have, the best way to attract A players, superstars to your organization, is to have A players within your organization
yeah.
that attract people. A players like working with other A players. So that takes time. And I do a lot with my clients to make sure they're assessing their talent and they're maximizing what I call talent density, which is kind of your percent A players minus your percent C players. So if you have a high level of talent density, your A players are going to attract other A players. Your A players are going to stay. Your A players are usually 3x to 5x more productive than your mediocre performers. So you don't need as many people. So that's number one. Number two is you've got to build a virtual bench. You always need to be networking. You always need to be asking people, who do you know that's a superstar that I ought to be talking to? And you're not necessarily interviewing them for a job. What you're doing is you're building that network because you may not need what they have right now. If they're a superstar, there's a pretty good chance they may be super happy where they're working right now and real fulfilled by where they're working. But if you have a leadership team of 5 people and you say, hey, every quarter, each of us need to add 2 people to our virtual bench of potential A players that we keep in touch with, you could see how that number gets really big and then, pretty quickly. And then when you do have a need, instead of saying, well, we better post another job to LinkedIn or Indeed or wherever you're posting,
Yeah.
first place you want to go is to that virtual bench.
Yeah. That is fascinating because you're right. It's just giving yourself options. And those people, they'll come and go, right, as they gain other awesome employment with other companies because you're going after those A players and you're researching that. But it's such an easy thing if you're building that culture and you're creating that environment that attracts people that want to work with your company because you're an A-level company.
Yeah, and here's the stumbling block. The stumbling block is creating the right culture, building that virtual bench is not going to help you hire a VP of sales tomorrow.
Right.
So people are like, I don't have time for that stuff. I got to put out a great job posting and I just got to, if they could fog a mirror, we're going to bring them in here. And then you never solve the problem. So the challenge is you've got to take a longer term view of it or you're not going to fix the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I talked with a good buddy of mine who was in a similar situation. He's like, I've been in situations where I've had to hire somebody like I need a body tomorrow, right? Can you pass a drug test and can you show up, get here to the workplace? And he says in every scenario where he's had to hire, under emergency or under duress, he's like, it has never worked out. They have never been a good employee. They have never lasted, the whole 9 yards. And the same as the opposite. He's like, when I've had time and I can see this need coming and I have time to prepare and, do all the things, then that, your chances of success on both ends exponentially.
And especially if you're hiring for your leadership team, right?
Right.
We're not talking, if you make a mistake on an accounts payable clerk,
Right.
okay. Couple of, invoices didn't get paid, vendor got angry at you, you fix it, you move on. If you make a mistake hiring a COO or a CFO or a head of sales or a head of service, you make a wrong hire there, think about the cascading effect of the rest of the folks in your organization.
Yeah, when you don't have somebody there's one of their primary roles is to be the thought leader, to be the visionary, and their vision is like, phew, just gone, or they have none whatsoever. Yeah, it's
and A players don't work for B players very long. So if you've got great people down here and you got somebody mediocre up here, right, that's a big risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that's a lose right there because they don't. You're absolutely right because they see that you're allowing that person above them to be a B player, and they're like, why am I putting forth all this effort if it's not even going to be rewarded or even recognized? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because I think too, and certainly you're dealing with a little bit different type of clientele with businesses and that have formal teams. But so many small businesses in our country find themselves in this emergency situation and they just don't understand, because we've had people contact us too and they're like, I need to hire these 5 technicians and all this type of stuff. And I'm like, awesome, that's great. I'm not a recruiter. Like, I can help you create a culture and all those types of things that you mentioned, but this isn't to get it, like you said, somebody to fog the glass tomorrow, which is a great expression. I like that a lot. Yeah. As we're moving on, because you talk about, well, first of all, I wanted to recognize this talent density because I hadn't heard that term before, and I think it's pretty phenomenal to recognize that you do have different layers, and they're all serve a purpose. You can't have 100% A players all the time. Like there needs to be, at least in my opinion, a mix. But you also need to understand what that mix is and the purpose of it too. I think that's kind of what you're alluding to with the talent density scenario.
Well, I do agree that to say our goal is 100% A players, and I define an A player as someone who is, blowing the doors off from a productivity standpoint. But there's another axis, which is are they adding value to the culture? Are they living the core values? To say we've got to have 100% A players is not realistic. But I will say, if you're talking about a leadership team of folks that lead others, you need to strive to get there. Because again, A players won't work for B players, too long. They will either leave or become B players themselves. So I think, if you look company wide, yeah, you're going to have a mix. I don't think there's ever a place for C players. You're not saying our goal is 10% C players in our organization.
Right.
So your goal is 0 C players.
Right.
You could live with some Bs and you want to strive to get a whole bunch of As. But on a leadership team, especially if you're talking about that executive team of folks reporting to the CEO, I believe, and I say this in Breakthrough Leadership Team in my book, on the executive team, you need to have all A's. If you have any B's, they better have A potential within the next 6 months or they don't belong.
Yeah, absolutely. And that should definitely be defined and clearly expressed in your expectations as part of that hiring process. Like, yeah, we see your potential. You're not quite there yet, but we'll get you there, kind of thing. Yeah, definitely. Now, between coaching and authorship, writing books,
Sure,
whatever
that's a
the word
word.
is. And then speaking, like, what have you got coming up? What's happening in your worlds in the near term, like early 20, as we finish out this year and then early 2023? You mentioned starting a podcast. What else kind of projects do you have coming
Yeah,
up?
I mean that's the biggie. I typically have, in addition to just working on growing my business, and I've been doing, a whole lot more professional speaking, keynotes, some workshops is becoming a bigger part of what I do. Coaching is still the biggest part of what I do, will probably always be. But I typically have one big project each year. So my big project for 2023 is going to be getting my podcast off the ground. The working title right now is just called the Build a Great Leadership Team Show. Really simple and to the
Cool.
point.
Yeah.
And then I do have, book number 3, which is all about, it's a little more of a self-leadership book about focus. I call it focus switching, from a disempowering focus to an empowering focus. It's to build a great team. You got to be able to lead yourself before you can lead a great
Right.
teim. Writing that next book, I think, is 2024, maybe late 23, 2024. And the big project next year is getting the podcast off the ground.
Yeah, that's cool. I suspected as we were talking that you had another book going, at least up here, and starting to take the little notes here and there as you steadily build it throughout the year. So that's pretty cool. And sounds like, just like most entrepreneurs that are, looking to help other businesses, you've got massive action taking place, not only with yourself, but to serve your clients. So that's pretty cool. And I'm looking forward to when you launch your podcast. Please make sure and let me know so we can get it out there and make sure people take advantage of it. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. Appreciate that.
Yeah. So now I ask all my guests this, because I think it is so interesting to hear the different perspectives. And certainly most of my guests they lean one way versus another. But what is your opinion, whether based on, how you grew up, what you've experienced in your own workforce career, or the people that you interact with and coach? What is your definition difference between a manager and a leader in a business sense?
It's a great question. The way I tend to look at it, and I'm stealing this from a client many years ago who said this, and I said, can I steal this from you and not give you credit? He said, fine.
Right.
So the way I like to think of it is, you manage tasks,
Okay.
you lead people, right? So I think if you are a leader, manager, whatever you call yourself in an organization, I think you've got to be doing both. Right? You've got to be managing tasks, managing processes, but you've got to lead people. And understanding that mix of doing both, I think, is critical to becoming someone that can cultivate, a team of not only A players, but folks who feel like they are growing, that they're in kind of a growing, fulfilling environment.
Right. So would you say, is it the position that defines the role, manager, leader, or is it the role that defines the position? to go
Ooh.
just a little bit deeper. Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but just
No,
as you
no,
were talking
I
about that,
love
I'm
it.
like,
I think it's, I actually think regardless of what position you're in,
okay,
whether you are, the CEO, of a company, whether you are, a, manager of an accounts payable function or a customer service supervisor. I think
yeah,
regardless of position, you need to think about both things, the leading of people, the managing of tasks. And I would say as you move up within an organization, I think the leading becomes more important. The managing becomes less important. So as a CEO, if you're spending 80% of your time managing tasks, you're in deep trouble. As
yeah,
a CEO,
definitely.
you better spend 80% of your time leading people. But as an accounts payable supervisor, if you're spending 80% of your time managing the tasks and 20% leading people, that's probably not such a bad thing.
Right, right, yeah. No, I like that. That's really good. And that changes, right? As you mentioned your earlier from going from COO to CEO, that further, even though they're top level executives, C-suite executives, that further changes the roles and the percentage that you need to switch that lever,
Absolutely.
either way. Yeah, that's cool. Now, I know people have been listening to this and they're like, man, this guy has got it together, Mr. Goldman. I need to get into your world. How do people get a hold of you? How do they follow you? What's the best way for them to reach out to you if they want to learn
Yeah,
more
so
about what you
so
do?
few things. If you want to just find out more about me and my coaching practice and my books, it's mike-goldman.com. I couldn't get Mike Goldman without the dash. Somebody in Big Brother in Australia or something got that. But it's mike-goldman.com. I do have we talked about A, B, and C players and talent density. I do actually have a free video course that if you go to mike-goldman.com/limitless, you'll find that course. So that would be great. Buy my book, Breakthrough Leadership Team. And if you want to follow me on, I guess I'll pick Instagram. It's at Mike Goldman Coach on Instagram.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. And I will be sure to link to the books and to your free course and your website as well as your Instagram and social media. So, if you're listening to this or watching on YouTube, scroll down. There'll be direct links straight to Mr. Goldman's world, and you can start following him and interacting with him that way. So that's really cool. All right. Thank you so much for this. This has been pretty incredible. Any final last things you want to leave the audience with?
Yes, so
Stage is
first,
yours.
thank you very much. And I guess I'll leave the audience with this idea, planting the seed for my 2024 book is
Yes.
that, if you want to be a great leader, you want to build a great company, it's got to start with you leading yourself. I'm working with a leader right now that believes all the problems of the world are the problems of all the folks on his leadership team. And it's a challenge to get him to look in the mirror and realize it starts with him. So know that it starts with you, and it starts with you having your head on straight every day with the right empowering focus.
Yeah, that's great. And if nothing else you take from this interview, other than that last statement, you'll be well on your way to becoming that impactful leader in your organization. So thank you for that. Mr. Goldman, thank you so much for your time. And it has been my absolute pleasure to get to kind of listen and see how your brain works and hear some of your stories. It's been really cool. So I very much appreciate you.
Thank you, Kale. I appreciate your show. Appreciate you as well. It's been fun.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Well, this has been the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. We've been hosting Mr. Mike Goldman, who is leadership coach, speaker, and author. Make sure, do yourself a favor, hit up his social media, get into his world, start learning about what all he does and the things that he has to offer, especially if you are in that leadership team building mode of your business. He can absolutely help you. No matter where you're at in the world, have a fantastic afternoon. Bye.